Welcome back, everybody, and today it is another video in my 2023 NFL offseason prediction series, and we're covering the Cleveland Browns. Make sure to hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content on this channel, and leave a comment in the comment section below. Speaking of comments, the elephant in the room here with this team, this is not a political video. I will not be addressing the misconduct of this team's quarterback outside of this introduction right here. Full disclosure, I wish nothing but a lack of success to this organization for as long as they have that guy under contract, and I cheer against them every week because of it. But I will try my best to look at this from an analytical point of view. This is about the team as a whole, not just one player. Regardless of how that front office handled the acquisition and the payments of that player. It has nothing to do with their salary cap, nothing to do with their draft strategy, and that's what we're here to talk about, including the head coach, who we'll talk about first. So we have the head coach, Kevin Stefanski, who's been there for a couple of years now. I believe he's been there 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. But he seems to be the person that they've solidified as their head coach, a team that's had so much instability at that position, which is really, you can kind of tell which teams have struggled to be successful based upon how often there's overturnage at their coaching position, at their quarterback position, and no one's seen more of that than Cleveland. They've had that more so than I think Detroit and Houston and all these other teams. So hopefully Kevin Stefanski's come in and he's been the guy that's going to solidify everything. I think their performance this year, given that I think it was pretty much out in the open that this was a glorified preseason, extended preseason for them, knowing that they weren't going to have the quarterback that they invested in for most of the season. So it was a lot of just guys, expressing their ability to play on Sunday under great amounts of adversity. It was a lot of guys just playing for their jobs this upcoming season, where it looks like now is when they're going to put their best foot forward. And we'll look at some of the rankings that they had. So we look at their offensive rankings, and they were in the bottom half of the league for most of these categories. Their running game with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt was the star of the show. And I expect that to be a strong part of their offense moving forward, even with, on a talent level, a top 10 quarterback potentially on their roster, because, you have Nick Chubb. You're not going to have Kareem Hunt, but you have Demetric Felton, who was certainly a my guy when he came out in the draft. And he's just so versatile. You can put him at running back. You can split him out at receiver and run like tunnel screens. You can put him in the slot and just run him on drag routes, jet sweeps, all that kind of stuff. So I think Demetric Felton's role with Kareem Hunt out of the pitcher is going to increase, and I think that's going to make everything better. It's going to keep the run game strong. It's also going to help with the passing game a lot. Going to help with those red zone percentage and third down conversion percentage. I think it'll help cut down on the sacks because it's going to be a constant safety blanket check down guy that's going to be available there. For Watson, the turnovers, once they get going, I think next year's the real test. In all fairness, for things like turnovers, and I think for just overall execution on the offensive side of the ball, but where they were completely solid and running the exact players and scheme that they were going to be running going forward was on the defensive side, and the defense was kind of, I will say, lackluster. They were 20th in points given up. They were good against the pass, but they were also horrendous against the run. And that's a sign of teams getting leads on them. And they were unable to sack the quarterback. They were unable to force turnovers. And I think that's why we're going to see a lot of, for lack of a better term, turnover in their front four specifically. We know the issues going on with Jadeveon Clowney. They don't really have a strong interior defensive line. They have Perion Winfrey, who they drafted this year, who's sort of waiting in the wings there to break out. They drafted Alex Wright, who's not really a number one starting edge rusher to complement Myles Garrett. But the squishiness of that interior is really where that rush defense comes into play, and that's going to cost you a lot of games. It's going to cost you a lot of games when teams run the ball down your throat because they're taking time off the clock, they're controlling the pace of the game, and then it leaves you with a lot less opportunity to be more balanced on the offensive side, and especially a team like Cleveland, whose running game is so strong and was such a heavy part of their offense, especially through the first 2/3 of the season. It's hard to come back from that because you end up in sort of a situation where if you can't stop the run, then there's a lot of pressure on you to execute on offense relatively perfectly, or else you're going to find yourself way behind, and the only option is going to be to throw the ball downfield, and that's when teams start laying back, and you just didn't have the bodies and the weapons in the receiving game and in the passing game to be able to execute that. So that defense, they really got to focus on improving the rush defense specifically to create more balance in their opponents and then allow more balance for themselves. And it's going to be a bit of an uphill battle because they are negative in the cap with minus $8.9 million. So they're going to have to clear out a lot of cap room. But luckily, they got guys who are sort of like middle of the pack guys who they can't afford to lose. And I was looking at their impending free agents, and the only one I can think of bringing back was Thomas Graham. He's an exclusive restricted free agent you can get for $870,000. And he's a good depth at the quarterback position, really coming along. I think he's got a lot of potential. And then you can restructure some guys. Amari Cooper, you restructure him for $14.1 million. You kind of knew the restructuring was coming anyway with Amari Cooper when they acquired him. So it's a good way to clear up all this cap space. And then Wyatt Teller frees up another $8.5 million in savings. You see they're cutting Jadeveon Clowney to zero cap savings. There's no cap savings in Jadeveon Clowney. Just based on his contract structure, you're only eating about a couple $1 million in dead money. Joe Haeg, $2 million in cap savings, and then Jakeem Grant, just under $3 million in cap savings. These are guys who they are, with Haeg and Grant, they're depth guys, right? They're, I don't want to say easily replaceable, but easily replaceable. Jakeem Grant is more of a return slot specialist. You're hoping Anthony Schwartz is who that guy is. You also have Demetric Felton, who I talked about earlier, who can fill that role as well. Then you got Joel Haeg, who's sort of like that seventh offensive lineman. That's something you can replace in the draft for a much cheaper cap hit. And when you're in need of the salary cap, these are the type of players that generally are going to be the ones to go, just so you can have more fluidity and more flexibility leading up into the draft to be able to sign your draft picks. And then that second, third wave, probably the third wave of free agency, is when those guys can be possibly brought back. But on its face, seems to be the easiest way to make sure that they have some type of cap room to be able to maybe bring in some lower end depth players for much cheaper than what these cap hits, specifically in Grant and Haeg, are going to affect their bottom line. So with all that, they get $18.5 million in spending cap, which, hey, I'm a pretty good general manager. I'm freeing up a lot of cap room here. And then we look at their team needs. They don't really have that many. In reality, they really don't. It's getting a great wide receiver complement for Amari Cooper. You have Donovan Peoples-Jones. Okay, you have Felton, who's sort of like a gadget player. You got Anthony Schwartz, who's just a straight line speed guy. So maybe get somebody who's more of a traditional wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 will really help that offense moving forward. You got some good tight end depth going on there, but it's really that front four, the interior defensive line and the edge group, where you're really going to be looking to add guys in there. And I think that they can do that through the draft. They don't necessarily have to do that during free agency. This is something they can invest their draft capital in, because the edge group and the interior group on day 2 especially is going to be pretty fruitful for them at those positions. So they can find some really quality guys with their day 2 picks to fill those roles. But that doesn't mean they're not going to be active in free agency. And I saw 3 guys in free agency who currently make about the cap hit that I gave them, that $1 million to $1.2 million cap hit. And they could actually fill significant roles on this team. Matt Skura can be that Joe Haeg replacement as that interior, that fourth interior offensive lineman, can play center, can play both guard positions, and he's almost $1 million cheaper than Joe Haeg. And then you got David Mayo for $1.2 million. He can be that third or fourth linebacker on the roster with JOK and Anthony Walker there. You even got what's his name? Phillips? Is it Jordan Phillips? Not Jordan Phillips. Mayo can be that fourth linebacker, great special teams player, great leader, great guy to have in the film room. Lots of experience. And then you got Dane Cruikshank, who went to Chicago, didn't have a lot of success there, but he can come in and be that replacement be that third safety on the roster with Delpit and Johnson taking the top two roles. Ronnie Harrison's gone. So you can fill Cruikshank into that role. And again, you get a great special teams player. You get a guy with some experience, in multiple different defenses, played for multiple different teams. So it's about getting guys in who can be positive influences in the film room, in training camp, in practice, and are guys that are replacement level players who you don't mind if, a guy picks up an injury, a guy gets a start or gets more snaps in Mayo and Cruikshank's case for a couple of games throughout the year to sort of let guys like Anthony Walker, like JOK, like Delpit, like John Johnson maybe get their sea legs back if they pick up some sort of injury, or you want to put them on a snap count because they're banged up. These are guys that are reliable and can fill that role, and you're very comfortable with it. So after that, you're left with $14.9 million to sign your draft picks and fill out the rest of your roster. Now, the big advantage they have, if you call it an advantage, is they don't have a first-round pick, so a lot of their draft class is going to be a lot cheaper. So they're going to have a little bit more money to then fill out the rest of their roster following the draft with that second wave of free agency, that third wave of free agency. So they're going to have a little bit more leeway than other teams to fill out the needs that they may have following the draft. And their draft strategy is, in my opinion, one of the most straightforward ones of any team in the NFL. Front four. Your first two picks in this draft, one of them should be an edge rusher, the other one should be an interior defensive lineman. Even if you get a more traditional, like oversized defensive end, and then you work him in on early downs, and you have Alex Wright come in on those rushing downs, maybe bump that guy inside with Perion Winfrey or whoever else you have on the interior. And then you spend another pick on maybe someone like a Siaki Ika, a Gervin Dexter, a Mozzie Smith, Jaquelin Roy, guys like that who are going to be those true first and second down interior guys to really help out with that run game. And then for the rest of the time, your day 3 picks, that's when you focus on your depth. That's when you just draft BPA. Draft the best player available on the board, because you can afford to add some depth really anywhere. And then it allows you to decide with those post June 1st cuts, which there's usually a lot more cap savings that come with those. It gives you a better idea of which players you could designate that to. So if you end up getting a bunch of linebackers, maybe you part ways with Anthony Walker. If you get some guys in the cornerback room, maybe there's someone in there that you can dump. Maybe if you get guys like a running back or something, you have a couple of backs underneath Chubb and Felton that you could you might be a little more comfortable getting rid of. Or maybe there's a backup quarterback in there that you like better than Kellen Mond. You let them compete, and then you maybe cut Mond, maybe you cut that quarterback. I think that there's a lot of leeway, and this is as good of a position as a non-playoff team can be in going into an offseason, I think, outside of course, not really having the cap flexibility to add someone truly significant to your roster. But they really do have most of the roster filled out in a way that should project to a lot of success for at least the next couple of years. And then as they navigate the cap and restructure guys and void years and all this this cap magic that everyone does, they can manipulate things a little bit and maybe open themselves up to be able to sign a big time free agent in the next couple of years that might put them over the top once they've really established a lot of these younger guys and what those guys' roles are going to be in the big picture. And there you have it, my offseason predictions for the Cleveland Browns. Make sure to thumbs up this video if you haven't already. Subscribe if you haven't already. Those are the two most important things you can do. And comment in the comment section. Obviously, that's where your comments go. Your thoughts on the Cleveland Browns and what you think about their offseason potential. And I will see you guys with the next video next time